Hello, and welcome to my presentation. My name is Amanda McKenna, and this presentation is prepared for EDU 1107, taught by Dr. Holly. This presentation is for my micro-teaching assignment that looks at social cognitive awareness, self-concept, and moral development. The objectives of this presentation are to look at social cognitive awareness, self-concept, and moral development. A little history on social cognitive awareness. It was developed by Dr. Bandura. He was born in December of 1925 in Alberta, Canada. He attended the University of British Columbia for his undergraduate and then continued on to the University of Iowa for his graduate degree. Now, in the social cognitive awareness theory, Bandura states that a theory must show how people acquire competency, values, and styles of behavior, and must also explain how people motivate and regulate their behavior. So, again, what is social cognitive theory? Well, according to Bandura, social cognitive theory is founded on an agentic conception of human development, adaptation, and change. To be an agent is to influence the course of events by one's actions. Social cognitive theory subscribes to a causal structure grounded in a triadic reciprocal causation. In this triadic codetermination, human functioning is a product of the interplay of interpersonal influences, the behavior individuals engage in, and the environmental forces that impinge on them. Because interpersonal influences are part of the determining conditions in this triadic interplay, people have a hand in shaping events and the course their lives take. So what does that mean? So to take a closer look at Bandura's social cognitive theory and what that means. So it says that he has a triadic approach or a triadic reciprocal causation. In this concept, he's saying there are three different factors that are all interplaying that ultimately affect an individual's development in social cognitive awareness. Now, social cognitive awareness is important for determining the motivation and behavior of an individual. All three of these basically determine human function. Now, basically this is implying that we respond and contribute to our life and environment. We aren't just products of circumstances. So while we have our personal and our behavioral, there are also environmental factors as well. When looking at the social cognitive theory, it's also important to realize that there is something called goal realization. Now, in goal realization, there are four processes that bring us to this: self-observation, self-evaluation, self-reaction, and self-efficacy. Now, as Bandura talks about reaching that goal realization, this is very important for realizing our social cognitive awareness, and again, that we contribute to our life and our environment, and that we aren't just products of circumstance. Next, we're going to be looking at self-concept. Now, this is the individual's belief about him or herself, including the person's attributes and who and what the self is. Now, there are two parts to self-concept. The first part is what we call the existential self, and this is the recognition of oneself as a separate entity. Now, this can happen as young as 2 to 3 months, and this is where the individual starts to realize that they are separate from, say, their caregivers, like their mother or their father. The next part is the categorical self. Now, this is to be aware of oneself as an object in the world. And thus, being an object, that means that we will have properties and that we will be able to experience things in life, but also be experienced by others. So when looking at self-concept, one of the first important concepts is self-image. How do I define myself? And the four factors for how someone defines themselves is physical description. How do I look? Am I tall? Am I short? Do I have curly hair? Do I have brown eyes? Next would be our social roles. What is my role in society? Am I a stay-at-home mom? Am I a teacher? Am I a doctor? Am I a football player? Am I a student? Next would be our personal traits. Am I outgoing? Am I anxious? Do I have tenacity? Our next one and fourth factor would be our existential statements. Now, for our existential statements, this is going to be more abstract, maybe saying I'm spiritual or I'm one with the earth. Now, typically, young individuals tend to have their self-image in their personal traits. So maybe at the high school level, an individual would define their self-image based on their personality. I'm outgoing. I'm extroverted. I'm introverted. Whereas adults, maybe between 30 to 50 years old, are going to be looking more at their social roles to define their self-image. What is my role in society? Am I a stay-at-home mom? Am I a successful business person? The next part of self-concept is self-esteem and self-worth. How do I value myself? Now, for self-esteem and self-worth, you can either be one of high self-esteem or one of low self-esteem. In high self-esteem, we are going to have confidences in our abilities. Now, these may be genuine or they may be perceived, but we have confidence in our ability to complete tasks. Our next is our self-acceptance. Do we accept ourselves for who we are, or are we always critical in comparing ourselves to others? Next is worrying about what others think. Are you constantly worried about their approval? Are you constantly worried that maybe they don't think you're good enough? And the last thing that a high self-esteem person will exhibit is their optimism. They tend to be more optimistic in personality. Those that have a low self-esteem tend to lack confidence. Whether it's perceived or not, they don't believe that they actually have the ability to possibly complete a task. They want to be or look like somebody else. So they're always comparing themselves to another individual, thinking that they are not enough. They are always worrying what others think, comparing themselves, thinking that they are not enough, that they don't live up to somebody's standards, and they tend to be more pessimistic in the way that they view the world. Now, when looking at self-concept, there are 4 factors that are ultimately going to affect self-esteem. The first one is going to be the reactions of others. How do they react around us? Do they want to be with us? Do they seek out our approval? Do they have a positive opinion of us? That would give us a positive self-esteem. Or maybe they avoid us or they don't confide in us. This might give us a negative self-image. Now, next would be comparison with others. How do we compare ourselves? Do we compare ourselves as being successful, being happy? This would again go with a positive self-esteem. Or maybe we compare ourselves and we think, oh, I'm not good enough. I'm not successful compared to my neighbor. They're prettier than me. This would be a negative self-esteem. Next would be our social roles. Now, a lot of times with social roles, positive and negative self-esteem come from the stigmas associated with those roles. So if you have a successful career, maybe you're a lawyer or you're a doctor or you're a teacher, and you feel that you've achieved a high ranking in society, versus a negative self-esteem if you have something with a negative stigma. Maybe you're a prisoner, or maybe you're unemployed, or maybe a role that you don't find is very successful. And the last part is going to be identification. How do we identify ourselves? How do we identify ourselves within a group? Next would be ideal self. What would I like myself to be? And basically, if you have a positive self-image, while it might not be exactly with your ideal self, it's going to be more congruent with your ideal self. Generally, if you have a negative self-image and you don't like yourself, it is going to be incongruent with what you consider your ideal self. Now, again, the same 4 factors are going to be affecting our ideal self. how others react to us, specifically our significant other. Do they give us attention? Do they give us praise? How do we think we compare to others? Again, our social role in identifying others. The next theory that we're going to talk about is moral development theory. This is basically the framework of this comes from Dr. Kohlberg. He was born in Bronxville, New York in 1927 and passed away in January of 87. He completed his BA and PhD in psychology at the University of Chicago, where he actually became interested in Jean Piaget's work while working on his degree. Now, with moral development, the question is, how does moral reasoning develop within individuals? There are 3 levels to moral development. The first is the pre-conventional level, which basically is where our morality comes from external controls, such as maybe a parent, and we fear punishment or we are seeking positive rewards. Second would be the conventional level, and on the conventional level, we're looking more at social roles and conforming to those social roles. And in the third, post-conventional level, this is where we move beyond our opinion of society and we're looking more abstract principles and values. Now, within these 3 levels falls Kohlberg's 6 stages. Those 6 stages are punishment, obedience, orientation, and instrumental purpose. Those 2 are going to fall under stage 1. In punishment obedience, we are going to be looking at fearing our punishment, whereas instrumental purpose orientation, we're going to be looking at seeking rewards. And the good boy, nice girl orientation and law and order orientation, these are going to fall under the second convention where we're looking at social roles. Now with good boy, nice girl, our behavior will be determined by social approval. We want to be accepted by society. Whereas in law and order orientation, it's going to be more based on social rules and laws that determine our behavior. The last is social contract orientation and universal ethical principle orientation. These fall under level 3, which are post-conventional or principle level. And basically, when looking at these, individuals determine their behavior, and the individuals view laws and rules as flexible with society. According to Kohlberg, the universal ethical principle orientation is the highest stage of functioning, and he claims that some people will never actually reach this level. Now, further questions for or further inquiry or questions that we'd maybe like to ask ourselves for discussion and development are, how do self-cognition awareness, self-concept, and moral development play a role in childhood development? How do schools and teachers impact the development of self-cognition awareness, self-concept, and moral development in our students? And can schools and teachers help individuals overcome established negative self-cognition awareness, self-concept, and moral development? Thank you for watching my presentation.